Do you get to see this?
It's helpful to see what's up there, yeah. Do you want to just move it over?
A little bit for them to see it.
Oh, yeah, that's fine too, because I can see the other one, if it's, oh, okay, so it can't be moved, that's fine, oh, yeah. We're ready whenever you are. Okay. Okay. Big balls. Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's.
You can put it up on the screen. Yeah, so it's ready.
Where is it going? Should I? Yeah, okay, so you're gonna. They want to over. Good evening. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. I will begin by taking roll call for the town council.
Betty Ross,
Here.
Mary Maha,
Here.
Nancy Bai,
Here.
and Mary Gladden.
Here. And now, if the planning commission would be there, please.
Michael Swistak,
Here.
Duncan Pendlebury,
Here.
Mick Cochran,
Here.
Diane Harrison, and Bernie Pfeiffer.
Here.
Thank you. I will call the meeting to order. Would you please join me in saying the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Before we begin, say good evening to everyone and just to explain a little bit. I kind of thought, maybe wish that we had an office. But maybe so I just wanted to explain the purpose of tonight's meeting, and it's to provide a high-level overview of the town's comprehensive community plan, its contents and applications for each public body member to understand the nature and significance of the policy document. Tonight is intended to be an opportunity for discussion and for questions among the council members and planning commission members following the presentation. This is a working session focused on education and clarification. I do want to emphasize that while this is a public meeting, it's not a public hearing. There will be a formal public hearing next Wednesday, January 28th, at which time members of the public will be invited to provide comments and participate in the process. We appreciate everyone's attendance this evening and look forward to a productive and informative discussion. Thank you. Yeah. Lisa, or
Thank you, so I have prepared a presentation. Just to kind of go over the basics of it. The planning commission obviously is very familiar with this. We've been at this for 16, 17 months. So Roberta's going to change the slides for me. Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay. So basically, we're just going to talk about at the beginning, what does the comprehensive plan do? It's the town's long-term policy document. It's updated every 10 years. It sets the vision, the goals, and the priorities. It guides decision making rather than approving projects or zoning or changing zoning by itself. It reflects community values and local conditions. It provides the policy foundation for local regulations and future investments. So in short, the comprehensive plan says where the town is headed, not exactly the rules for getting there. However, it does have some fairly specific implementation actions that you've probably seen already in the implementation section. So how is the plan implemented? Next slide, please. The zoning ordinance and the subdivision regulations have to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So within 18 months of adoption of the comprehensive plan, we have to update if it's necessary, update the subdivision regulations and the zoning ordinance to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. In the case with this ordinance or this comprehensive plan, we are suggesting some land use changes, which we will talk about. So that does reflect onto the zoning ordinance. So regulatory updates follow plan adoption. So let's say that we have some policy changes for hazard mitigation. So that would, we might have to update the hazard mitigation plan. So that's what we mean by regulatory updates. Board and council use the plan to guide rezonings, special permits, capital planning, and investments. Implementation happens over time through ordinance updates, funding decisions, and partnerships. And the plan provides continuity for the community, even as projects, officials, and conditions change. In short, the plan sets direction first, regulation and actions follow. And I will say that thank you everyone who has provided feedback on the format and the presentation of the plan. I appreciate that. Our consultant did a great job in laying it out, but we also recognize that there are some format issues still, some errant pages that say saved pages. And also there may be a few typos, and Carrie has gone through the whole document one final time. And so we provided those to the consultant and they will be handled administratively. And I spoke to the solicitors, and if they're not substantive, they can just be changed. Even they don't need to be brought up in the course of the hearing itself. So the next slide, please. Land use. Okay, goals and policy direction. So I'm going to go through all of the 9 elements of the comprehensive plan, and you'll see in some of the areas there might be something that's underlined. Now, I didn't say, so as we go from one comprehensive plan 10 years later, 15 years later to the next comprehensive plan, there are shifts, but there are not necessarily significant changes. So if there are significant changes, I will point them out. But generally, we've just seen shifts, and I'll kind of explain what that is as we go through it. So in terms of land use, there wasn't a lot of shifts. I know I've had discussions with several of you about our rural character.
I have to say it's probably easier to follow along if you can't see up there by looking at H2 in chapter 2. That's where we're starting to be able to follow along there.
Thank you. So we're going to go through every element. So if there's something that's underlined, I'll point that out. That just kind of identifies a shift in either the way we talked about that issue, or it may be a shift in maybe we didn't recognize something 10 years ago and now we recognize it. So in terms of land use, we still want to preserve and enhance Jamestown's rural and village character. And before that was preserve only. So now we're talking about enhancing it also. Align land use decisions with environmental capacity. So it's really quite a bit more apparent in this comprehensive plan that we have limited water resources. It's always been an issue in every comprehensive plan for the last 4 decades that we have limited water resources. And I think this time it really becomes very evident in the plan itself. Support housing diversity and affordability through permanent sustainable funding source for affordable housing. Previously, we didn't necessarily talk about a funding source, but we'll talk about that in the housing section. And strengthen the commercial village by prioritizing mixed use, walkability, and connectivity while maintaining neighborhood compatibility. Promote predictable and consistent land use regulation through alignment of the zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, which we discussed. Encourage reinvestment and reuse of existing buildings and developed areas rather than expansion into undeveloped or environmentally constrained land. And I think our zoning does that anyway, but it's a great thing to have as a policy.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yes.
We're having trouble following you. We don't even.
I'm going by
You're
that.
going right.
I'm going by that presentation, yes. So I'm going through each element. So right now I'm on the land use element. So each chapter is a different element. And I'm really just kind of going through what,
Because it doesn't align with chapter.
We can make copies.
Yeah.
Should you really, say it out, what you mean,
It's.
Is it? I don't think it's like- Does the planning commission want a copy as well, or just the council?
Yeah.
Okay, great,
It's because.
thank you.
This is your sharing your center.
So also in terms of land use, we're balancing economic vitality with the quality of life, and that's discussed a lot in the section for economic development.
Thank you.
So
Next slide.
The future land use. So future land use is also part of the land use element. And when we look at future land use, we're looking at, do we need to make any significant changes? We have a future land use map that was adopted in 2015. Is that still relevant? And so there's several areas that we'll go through at the end of this presentation where we're making suggestions for changes to the future land use. And that will in turn translate into changes to the zoning ordinance. But the future land use provides a long-term framework for land use patterns based on community goals and island constraints. It distinguishes areas for growth, stability, and protection. It aligns future development, supports consistency between the comp plan zoning and subdivision regulations, and establishes the context for specific map changes. As I said, will be discussed later. So the next section is natural resources. As I said, we talk, I would say, a bit more in this comprehensive plan about drinking water resources. It's always been a concern in every comprehensive plan, but this one, I think, even in the last one, we talked about looking at the resources in the unpublic water areas or the non-public water areas. And this time, we're really calling for some innovative approaches and really determining what the water capacity is for the north and the south end of the island. So that's something that's a little bit shifted, that innovative approach. Protect coastal freshwater and wetland resources. Maintain and enhance biodiversity. Something that was addressed in this comprehensive plan that wasn't necessarily addressed in the last one is limiting toxic pesticide and herbicide use. We have a group that's very active on the island in that, and so we have called that out in this comprehensive plan. Actively manage wildlife and invasive species. So we've always had a section on wildlife and invasive species. And this time we specifically have a section on deer and coyotes and how we can live with them harmoniously without being impacted by them. That's possible. And also a discussion of invasive plants as well. So strengthen land use controls and conservation strategies is discussed. So the plan for climate change and natural hazards, you'll probably see that in every section that I talk about. But one difference between the last plan and this plan, the state changed the guidelines. And before we just addressed it in each section, each element. This time we have a separate section for sustainability and resilience. So that we'll go through that as well. So that's a new section, but we still also discuss it in each section as well, but it's more comprehensively discussed in the separate element. And then also under natural resources, building community stewardship of the lands through partnerships, programs that support tree planting, habitat protection, and responsible land management. Next slide, please. So cultural and historical resources is the next element. So we basically, Jamestown's historic resources are very important, always have been, including buildings, landscapes, documents, and scenic views, and they've always been addressed. So we want to maintain Jamestown's rural and historic village character as a defining feature of the island. Encourage adaptive reuse of historic properties, strengthen local preservation tools. So even though we discussed historic districts and the possibility of them in the last comprehensive plan, I think there's stronger language and more recognition that now that we've lost several of our very, very important historic structures, I think the community is now more aware. I mean, we had a public workshop on creating a historic district in Shoreby Hill in 2011, and it did not get passed. 12, you said? 12. Thank you. And so I think it's time again for that to have that conversation, because I think the community has now seen that really we're getting renovation of our historic district and our businesses and our houses. almost by chance. We do have great village design guidelines, but a lot of it is left up to really that board sitting next to you that is so fantastic, and the work with staff, with applicants, is the only reason I think that we maintain some of that historic character. It's also increasing public awareness and engagement in historic preservation. That's critical if we're going to proceed in really talking about historic districts. And then balance preservation with flexibility. So ensuring protection strategies support property owners and community goals. I think the reason that we adopted form-based standards back in 2009 was because we knew the community wasn't quite ready for a historic district. So let's have some standards for design that really meet our traditional way of building in Jamestown. And so now maybe let's go to the next step, I think is what we're saying in this plan. The next element is open space, agriculture, and recreation. And this really talks about protecting land and water resources while expanding equitable access to open space and recreation. So it came loud and clear. If you looked at the section related to the community survey, people want access to areas, they want shoreline access. And so a lot of this is discussing that we want viable farmland, not just farmland. We want to be able to actually make a living. So one thing we really called out was the updating of our comprehensive recreation, conservation, and open space plan. It hasn't formally been updated since 1995. It was updated in 2004, and then we have another kind of iteration on our computer, but the Conservation Commission has been working very hard to update that, but without any professional help, they just haven't been able to make it work. So we're going to give them a little bit of assistance on that. Also preserve open space and farmland, protect drinking water, coastal resources, scenic vistas, and rural character. And then strengthen long-term land protection strategies. So these include funding mechanisms and a comprehensive land acquisition approach. I think the town has done a great job in really purchasing land and protecting land over the years. And so that updated recreation, conservation, and open space plan will help also identify some funding mechanisms. And then again, support viable and working farmland. So, you know, for example, when we bought the development rights to the two major farms in the Center Island in 2007, we wanted to make sure that they remained viable. That was actually part of the conservation easement, that they didn't just become fallow. We bought farms, we wanted them to remain farms. And so that's actually written into their conservation easement, that they has to maintain that lookable working farm. But I think we want to go one step further and actually help them to stay working farms. And so there's some discussion in this plan about agritourism. Planning Commission has talked about in the past, you know, should we have some guidelines on what farms can do in zoning? So that conversation may come up again. Balance conservation with public access, so ensuring that natural resources are protected while remaining usable and welcome. So there are, in fact, some properties that are protected that are not publicly accessible. And there are some that are publicly accessible. So really looking at the distinction between those two things. So the next section is economic development. I'll let you get to that page. Thank you, Kennedy. So the little bit of shift in this section is really, and this came out of the workshops, is that the businesses struggle. I think we all know they struggle during the off season. And is there a way for the town to support some strategies that would help them in the off season? So really just supporting a resilient year-round local economy that serves residents while respecting Jamestown's character. So promoting a diverse local economy, that's always been the goal in the economic development section. But, you know, we want to also not have an over-reliance on seasonal activity. We want to make it year-round. Strengthen year-round economic activity and reduce off-season volatility. Reinforce the village and waterfront as focal points. That's always been in our comprehensive plan, understanding that the historic waterfront is really what drives our business district. And encouraging reinvestment and adaptive reuse of existing buildings so that we can maintain that character of Jamestown. And then supporting year-round housing for a local workforce. I think that's really important, and we'll talk more about that in the housing element. Because that absolutely defines our economic stability in many ways. And support new lodging options is kind of a new theme in this plan as well. Now that we have lost all but one of our bed and breakfasts with the closing of the timeshares and those Bay Voyage Hotel, the only alternative then is short-term rental. And is there another way to encourage some new lodging options that fit our character? And then balancing economic growth with quality of life. Again, a little bit of a shift, ensuring development aligns with land use, infrastructure, and environmental limits. And that's really just kind of a sustainability issue, is that balance. The next section is public services and facilities. And so the main goal is to provide a high quality public services and facilities that are sustainable, affordable, and aligned with community needs. Makes sense. So ensuring public facilities and services remain cost effective and sustainable while fitting the scale and character of surrounding neighborhoods. Aligning growth with service capacity is a little bit of a shift. It's more of a strategy, even though we've always kind of thought that way. But before, like, for example, we've never denied a building permit because there's not enough water. So really looking at it more comprehensively and making sure that the growth that is going to happen aligns with our service capacity.
Lisa.
Yes,
Some of the sections are underlined and some, is there?
so the underline is really where I thought there was a little bit of a shift between the last comprehensive plan and this comprehensive plan.
Okay,
So I just kind of underlined it.
Different or.
Yeah, or shifted. Yeah, different, new or shifted. Yeah. Like I said, there's not a lot of absolutely new ideas, but there's a lot of shifts and, change in priorities, say, in certain things.
Okay.
So we talked about service capacity in the last comprehensive plan, but I think there's really more of a island-wide discussion in this comprehensive plan about we need to make sure that there's water for everybody, not just the public service area. So supporting the long-term viability of the volunteer fire department. Again, it was in the last comprehensive plan, but in other critical emergency services, we really made it a priority. Advanced sustainability and efficiency. So the town in our energy plan should be the leader. So when we build new structures, we should really be advancing sustainability and efficiency through that. And then to plan proactively for future needs using our data, funding strategies, and interdepartmental coordination, which we're great at. So the next element is transportation. And I would say that probably the big shift here is to really talk about a multimodal system and how that works for the island. So create a safe, balanced transportation system that supports mobility, health, and resilience. So that is also the health and resilience. We've always talked about healthy lifestyle, the lifestyle of Jamestowners. And it's really, I think after the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, it's really kind of solidified in this comprehensive plan. So improving pedestrian and bicycle safety and connectivity along major corridors. So new language that we have in this comprehensive plan is complete streets principles. And so really what that is about is really looking at when we build new roads or when we go to install water lines or sewer lines, looking at it as a holistic approach. Is this a good time to put in new sidewalks? Is this a time to make the water line bigger, so really looking at it from a long range planning perspective for complete streets. And then, as always, we talk about parking, but really to address parking strategically. I think the last comprehensive plan said we should buy a lot for parking. So, really just continuing to look at that and to really kind of work with the chamber and find out what their needs are. We haven't had a workshop with them in a while. Last time we had a workshop, I think we really encouraged them to engage in an economic development plan. the good news is we have 100% small businesses in Jamestown, but the bad news is we also have 100% small businesses in Jamestown and they're busy. You know, there are sometimes one person run businesses, and so for them to commit to an economic development plan with the town has been difficult. So I think just figuring out a way to engage with them so that their needs are really heard, I think is important. And we heard a lot of them in the workshops that we had as well. And also align transportation investments with land use and environmental goals. So the next section is housing. And housing has become much more critical, I think, in this plan. And we brought it back to the Affordable Housing Committee twice. And both times they said it doesn't sound critical enough. So we amended that section probably more than any of the other sections, but one of the major things is we shouldn't just meet our 10% goal. We should really strive to exceed it. So that is reflected in our goals and policies. And also supporting housing that allows residents to age in place. We don't have assisted living here. So I think allowing, you know, whether it's smaller scale structures, whether it's zoning amendments, anything that will allow people to stay in age in place, I think is critical to look at. And then again, encourage a diversity of housing types. We've made changes over the last 10 years in our zoning that does encourage a diversity of housing types, but let's not stop there. Let's continue to look at them. And then prioritize housing in appropriate locations that have infrastructure capacity and services. And then promoting small scale and contextual, context sensitive housing solutions. So again, we've made several changes over the last 10 years to our zoning. We've adopted compact cottage development. We've allowed accessory dwelling units for just about everybody. And so really looking at those small scale that provides a diversity of housing styles and prices for people to live here. And then really important, establish a dedicated and consistent funding source for housing. So we have a housing land trust. We're one of the only communities in the state that has a housing land trust, but it does not, even though the town dedicates funding to it every year, it's not a dedicated and consistent funding source because it's at the whim of the, you know, the town meeting and the town budget. So we really need to find and establish a dedicated and consistent funding source for our housing trust fund. So the next element is sustainability and resilience. As I said before, this is a new section that discusses everything all in one place, even though so many of these elements kind of cross each other. And you'll see that when you read it. But this one is really just to prepare Jamestown for climate, environmental, and economic change while protecting people and essential services. So really plan for climate change and natural hazards. We do that in a number of ways. We have our emergency operations plan, we have our hazard mitigation plan. And so we do that in a way, and we need to continue to do that. So these are all underlined because this is an intervention. Protect critical infrastructure and essential services before, during, and after emergencies. Strengthen resilience of vulnerable populations. Promote sustainable practices and green infrastructure. So, you know, we have done some green infrastructure in Jamestown. By that, it means that, you know, you have the difference between if you're going to protect a shoreline, you can put a seawall there, or you can figure out a way so that runoff doesn't impact, you know, erosion on the bank. So they call these green energy or green infrastructure. So advanced energy efficiency and renewable energy solutions. Again, we have an energy plan, and Carissa, our sustainability coordinator, has looked at that. And so she'll be making some comment on that as well. And then integrate resilience into everyday decision-making, including town purchasing, land use, infrastructure, capital planning. So I don't want to say the meat of the plan, but a lot of what we talk about in all these sections come to a point where, what does this mean to us in terms of land use? So we have our land use plan. This is the one from 2015 that you're looking at that was approved. And so we look at that each time we update the comprehensive plan and say, how does any of it need to change? And so there are a few changes. Next slide, please. The first one that I'll talk about, even though there are 4 overall changes, the biggest one is in the commercial limited district, the area surrounding the library. So we've been talking about this at the planning commission level and in the community survey for the last, I would say, 2 decades. About, do we have, our commercial limited district goes all the way from Arnold Avenue on North Road, all the way down to Spring Street. It's a very expansive space. Much of it is already developed as residential. And do we need that expansive commercial limited district? So this time the planning commission kind of honed in, and so the answers in the community survey were 61%, over 61% said we had enough commercial development today to accommodate future needs. Now, these are residents that you're asking a very important question to, so you have to realize this is just their opinion. And then the second question, Jamestown Commercial Limited District leaves room for commercial expansion, which Jamestown needs in the future. Do you agree with that or not? 47% agreed, 18% did not agree. And a large percentage, 34%, were not sure. Again, you're asking a resident a really important question, and so you're just getting their opinion, which is valuable. So the next slide that you're saying is, so right in the middle, that little red dot in the middle of the blue, that is the library. So that gives you a little bit of context. So the area to the right of those big black dashed lines, which are potential bikeway routes, is all blue around there. So we started talking at the planning commission about this area being almost wholly developed as residential. We've had several large expansions in that area, a lot of investment of expansions, new houses. And so does it really still need to be zoned as or targeted as commercial limited? So the planning commission, through a suggestion, we held several workshops with all of the residents in the area. They were given individual notifications in the area. Thank you. Next slide. And so looking at the whole commercial district, like I said, on the north of that CL district in the light beige color is Arnold Avenue, and the very bottom of it is Spring Street. So it's a fairly large area when you look at where the library is for commercial limited. And this just gives you, we went through and did a comprehensive analysis on what is actually in that district. So we've got 35 acres total area. We've got 56 single family homes, which equals 14 acres of that. You've got 12 two family homes, which is 4 acres. You've got 14 straight commercial uses, which is 5 acres. And then you have 11.5 acres of mixed use and commercial. So you have both residential and commercial on the same lot. So there's 11.5 acres of that. We only have 3 vacant parcels, which only equals 1/2 acre. So there's not a lot of vacant land. And we have the library and then 1 small park. So we looked at what is really, because that's how it is happening. When somebody comes in and says, I want to open a restaurant, what's available? You look at the commercial, they'll look at the commercial district, they'll look at what's for sale in the commercial district. And we've had a lot of people on North Road looking at houses. Can I convert a house into a restaurant? Sure you can. So we will get that commercial conversion over the years. And so looking at that, what is available for conversion from either commercial mixed use or single or 2 family vacant is 18.5 acres. So if you exclude the area around the library that I was talking about, you still have 13.2 acres. So next slide, please. So the area around the library, again, this is really the same information that I just went through, but it gives you an aerial photograph of really what you're looking at. So really what we have in there is only 3 commercial ventures right now, 3 commercial businesses. You've got the art center, you've got the Benson Woodworks, and you have Balance Sport and Fitness. So those are the 3 commercial establishments that you have in that area right now. So when we held the workshops with the residents, next slide, please. Again, there's just the future land use map with that area shown. The blue is the commercial limited area. So we can go back to that, Worms. And so we were looking to, is it possible to change that area from commercial limited, the blue areas, to high density residential? Because that is the current use right now. except for 3 businesses. Now we'll go to the next slide. Thank you. So in this slide, we really looked at it like, because it's hard to talk about future land use, commercial limited to high density residential, with what does that really mean? And so we presented this to the planning commission as you can see on the edges on the top and the right, you've got purple. That's the current R8 district. And so this area would fit nicely into that area. The lot sizes are appropriate. So let's look at that and see if it would fit into that area. The areas that are not bounded in the center, that's the 3 commercial businesses. So let's say that we don't want to take anybody's right if they're an existing commercial business away. So let's keep that commercial limited. And then the area at the bottom, it's this strange little enclave of very, very small lots, which is so sweet. They're existing that way. They're not going to change. They're all developed as residential. Many of them are so small, they don't even have on-site parking. So we looked at that area as kind of a different animal than the R8 district. And we'll just talk about why in a minute. But those are the areas that we looked at, both the purple bounded lots as well as the orange bounded lots. And these are the ones that we're looking at to change from commercial limited to high density residential that will eventually become a zoning change to possibly these 2 districts. And I will say, if it is changed in the comprehensive plan, the zoning ordinance has to be consistent with that. So high density residential is defined as a density. It doesn't specify zoning districts. So that's what it would have to meet, is the zoning densities that are discussed in the comprehensive plan. So the reasons for changing from commercial limited to high density residential, and this really pertains, almost, some of them pertain just to that area of the very small lots that were bounded in orange. But so all the lots under consideration for change to high density residential are currently used as residential. So right now, because all these houses are in a commercial limited district, they're afforded the setbacks for commercial districts. And those are slightly smaller setbacks than would be for a residential use. And so commercial setbacks are being applied to houses, creating overly large houses with minimal setbacks. So we also have another unique dynamic where the state law changed last year, or I guess it was last year. They refined it last year. It might have been 2 years ago. And they allowed, if you're an undersized lot, you're allowed to proportionally change your setbacks based on the proportion that you are undersized. So to make that a little bit clearer, if you are in an R20 district and you're required to have 20,000 square feet, and you're a 5,000 square foot lot, you're essentially a 3/4 or 0.75, or you're a 0.25% lot, right? And so your setbacks can be reduced by that much. So it has really, we found that in the village district, we have some applications on 5,000 square foot lots, and say in R20 district where you're literally, they're only required to have 2-foot setbacks from a structure to the side. Now, the building official has said, well, we need at least 5 just for maintenance and fire purposes. But still, that has put us in a little bit of a strange situation. So by the creation of that orange area that we talked about, the R4.5, where all those lots are very, very small, that would allow us to have a residential district in zoning that is smaller than our R8 district. Right now, our R8 district is our smallest residential lot size. So when applications come in for these small 5,000 square foot lots, the only district that we can point them to, so right now, then they changed the law and said that the town could also look at the next lowest zoning where they are conforming. And so we are looking at then, right now, without this R4.5, we're looking at commercial standards for residential lots. So the setbacks are commercial setbacks, and previously to last year, in our commercial downtown district, we had 0 setbacks in the front and the side. So that's what would be afforded to these residential lots. So it's a little bit of an awkward situation that we're in with this change in the state law. And so creating a new district that has residential setbacks in a residential district for smaller lots would allow us to have something to look towards with these small lots, because we have 5,000 square foot lots in Jamestown. There's some on Summit Avenue. There's some, outside, they're all over the island and they're not, it didn't make sense to zone them, like spot zone them, another district, so they exist in these. There's 5,000 square foot lots in the 2 acre district, even in the 5 acre district, so. It allows us to have something to look towards for setbacks when they come in.
Lisa, just a question on that.
Yes.
You're saying that because it's a zone commercial limited today,
Yes,
we apply the setbacks that are commercial.
correct,
Zero.
correct, even if they're building a house,
Like commercial.
yes, even if they're building a residence.
So they have,
Well, in the commercial limited, it's more than the commercial downtown district, so there are a little bit, so it's like 5 feet.
that's what I'm confused about, so.
Yeah,
I think what I was hearing was that because it's so on commercial limited. There isn't like. We have to use. The next best thing, which may be commercial to apply that, but it sounds like if we do nothing, they still have. We're not gonna just take the commercial downtown setbacks and apply them. Here, is that true?
if it is an undersized lot, yes, we would.
No, but not a commercial limit. This is true for more for residential situations.
No, it applies to all lots.
So in commercial limited, you could apply commercial downtown setbacks.
Right, if it's smaller than, because right now our commercial limited minimum lot size is 8,000 square feet. And the commercial downtown is 5,000 square feet, so yes, you would be able to apply the commercial
So
downtown.
each
setback.
of these lots that are 5,000 square feet. Theoretically would have no setback.
Well, we did change it last year in commercial downtown, just for that reason, to a 5 foot setback. For commercial downtown, so now they have a 5 foot.
Yeah, I just think if we're gonna talk about this, like, we should be clear, because I heard most, so I have a very different opinion. So.
Yeah, yeah,
Most people do.
yeah. So, we did, yes,
So the intention is then.
I'm sorry, call everybody, if you could please speak into your microphones, thank you.
So the orange area, the intent is that we make the orange area a new residential.
yes,
4.5, the purple arrows would be residential R8. And we would leave commercial limited for the few that are currently commercial properties.
that's the intent, and again, the zoning will not be effectuated until the zoning ordinance changes, so. Right now, all we're changing is the future land use from commercial limited. To high density residential, and then the zoning change will come after the comprehensive plan is approved.
And is there an intent? And I know it sounded like we're just going to shrink commercial limited district. Skipping ahead, but is there intent to grow it to match anywhere else or change it where it's all compressing or shrinking?
No, not at this time, not like I said, we've got to, I think that was the reason for the analysis, that we have a lot of areas for conversion to commercial. So in my opinion, we don't need to increase it anywhere else. Yeah,
Thanks.
Eric to weigh in on that. Gotta go that we have, people have residents in a residential zone. Have the ability to have home-based business with certain limitations. So even though potentially people in this neighborhood behind the library are losing their CL designation, coming R8, they still have the ability to have a home-based business. Either in the structure or structure, as long as it's confusing the.
Sure, it's more of an issue if you're looking at something that is retail, particular or a restaurant. It's-
right, so that actually was the next bullet, was basically eliminating the risk of commercial businesses in the middle of an existing residential neighborhood. So right now, as I said, that whole area is developed as residential except for those 3 businesses. So it's eliminating that risk. And again, anybody can have a home-based business. And so when we had the workshop at the planning commission, it's hard not to get into the weeds of what is this really gonna look like when it's rezoned. And so we really did look at the weeds and what could it be, and so the requirement allowing up to 500 square feet for a home-based business. I think it also says, or not more than 60% of the existing structure or something, there's language like that. And so we thought, well, in that area, because it's existing commercial limited, let's give them a little bit more, let's give them not the 60%, because a lot of the structures are so small. So we said, let's give them the full 500 square feet no matter what. If they want to live in 200 square feet and use the rest of it for their business, that's just fine. But again, this will happen when the zoning gets changed, not during this comprehensive plan. And so, yes,
So if zoning gets changed in that R 4.5 or 3,
yes,
if there's a smaller lot somewhere else on the,
yes.
those new restrictions would be the lowest.
So what that would allow the town to do is say, that our 4.5, let's say it's in that small 5,000 square foot lot, let's say it's in an RR 80 district, which requires 80,000 square feet, so it's significantly undersized lot. And so their setbacks would be this. So this, or the other option for the town now, as of last year, is that we could also point to the next lowest zoning district where that lot is conforming. And so we would look to this R 4.5, which has more residential setbacks. So it would allow us to utilize that instead of the proportional zoning setbacks. Yeah, so really, the town, when we look at building permits now, and it's an undersized lot, before we didn't have the choice, they simply used the proportional, or it was the applicant's choice, so they would pick the one that gave them the greatest benefit. And so now it's really the town gets to choose which they choose, whether it's the proportional setbacks or the next lowest zoning category where they are conforming. So it will be helpful from that perspective.
Would you say that the issue here has been in reference more to residential lots?
Yes,
Where, in fact, there was one right on there against that.
Yes.
5,000 square foot
mhm,
that became, in which, in fact, the person was actually going to build on the neighbor's property. But we even had the proportional aspect been applied. The neighbor, they would have shed their water onto the property, they would have done a lot of issues. And so the issue of trying to create a smaller lot, so that we didn't have to go for commercial.
right,
Setbacks,
setbacks,
we go to the residential lots were, that's where I think the imperative for this is. Now, the dilemma is you can't create a zoning district or zoning classification without having a district. Newport has discovered this because Newport has applied, Newport has two lovely new zoning districts, the R4 and the R6. I tried to apply them, but they don't have an R4 or R6 district and they can't. And their lawyers have told them that they can't use their new districts unless their new zoning classifications, unless they have a district to apply a district in which it's applied. And so it's an interesting thing. So that's probably part of where we're coming from to try to create a real district. In addition to the fact that this whole area behind the library were to become commercial, like we were to have a restaurant in there, it would be a little bit odd, and the parking would be positively impossible. So,
that's the next bullet.
yeah, so anyway, so there are some of these are some of the reasons for that particular area,
Right,
being looked at.
yeah, thank you.
Sorry, don't.
If you look at the use table, you're on.
Can you tap the?
Bang it.
Speak loud.
Click it the other way. Oh,
If you look at the use table. CL allows maybe used car,
Right,
all kinds of things, a long list of things that we probably wouldn't want to inject into a resident.
and the last bullet, tax rate for commercial and residential is the same, so there'll be no impact there.
Was there in that community, was there any pushback from people that are losing the
There was, and I would say that I probably met with 85% of them in person or at a meeting. And there was the change for the R8, there was a concern that there's several 10,000 square foot lots and people that wanted to have duplexes. And in the RA district, you need 12,000 square feet for a duplex. So we talked about, you know, is it possible to make it 10,000 square feet instead of in that particular district? So, you know, we looked at it as possibly an overlay district or possibly a new district that, you know, was formerly CL kind of thing. So, you know, I think we tried to really listen to the neighborhood and talk about like what their needs are. Parking was a big discussion, in that area.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of parking issues related, you know, as we've heard at the council level, and I think the police department has already looked at that. So, yeah, so there were concerns, and I think at the end, when the planning commission finally made the recommendation to, yes, change that area to high density residential, I think most everybody was satisfied. Yeah. Yeah, with what it could become. Yeah. Yes.
Tax rate for commercial and residential, I've always wondered about that.
Mm.
Even when I was, you know, commercial, you know, the commercial property was. Anyway, what is there a formula? Is there, like, I've heard before that we don't have enough commercial, industry here, businesses here to support a different tax rate, but I know that. I think we do, we have some big employers, I know we have some big, you know.
Yeah, I'm not the person to ask, but what I can tell you is the tax rate for the property itself, the building and the land, is the same.
Right.
Now, you probably also pay, for your infrastructure inside, you know,
And your business.
your business, yeah,
Yeah.
but the tax rate itself is the same. So I can't really respond to, you know, should it change or,
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was like
yeah.
one collect where it would be worth doing or not.
yeah, I think that's a conversation with the tax assessor that would make it worthwhile, yeah, yeah. Any other questions on that? It's complicated, but it's not complicated, so it's a lot to chew on and really kind of put your head around, so. That's the most significant land use change. Well, because, yeah, a lot of them will still be non-conforming, but at least they'll be more conforming.
Yeah.
And I think several of the property owners were actually happy about that. Is that, you know, like I said, we have a lot of 5,000 square foot lots, and so making it 5,000 square feet, what if they were just under, you know, so it's just a matter of.
What happened, what were the setbacks when, 5 feet on the side, you said, I think?
I don't have that information with me, but we will
But they
think
would
about
change.
it. They would change, they would be somewhere in between, I think my recollection is they're somewhere in between commercial limited and R8.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, so there was kind of like a happy medium in there. So obviously they're smaller lots, you know, the lot coverage, I think, was the same, recommended to be the same as R8. With a little bit less setback, so they could have, you know, be afforded a little bit more of a structure.
And when you say lot coverage, is that like the set wide?
Yes, yes,
What is that for RA?
it is 30%, no, it's 30%, yeah,
And it's CL, right?
CL is 35, yes. Yeah, and I would say, I mean, the planning commission has looked at this a lot. The building lot coverages in our ordinance are very generous. So you look at a lot and you go, geez, they covered the entire lot, but you really break it down because it doesn't include driveways, it only includes structures. So it would include a swimming pool, it would include a deck, it would include the building, a garage, you know, those kinds of things. So we do have, based on other communities and based on what we've seen, very generous lot coverages. Any other questions about that area? Okay, thank you. Additional future land use changes. So we have 2 Broad Street, which is the piece of property, the half-acre piece of property that the town purchased back in 2017 or 18, I believe. It was 300 feet of shoreline next to Park Dock. We have Mercy Whedon Court, which is an area that we discovered when somebody came in for a building permit that's actually zoned incorrectly. So we need to reflect, or it's zoned that, but we need to reflect it on the future land use map. As low density residential to moderate density residential, so it should be R40 basically. And then 20 Elm Street, so we have that area around the library, but that 20 Elm Street, if you. Let's go, oh, actually, I've got maps for all these, we'll go to the next map. So that is the 20 Elm Street. So it is actually a split zone. So the northern part of it is in commercial limited, the southern part of it is in commercial downtown. So we really don't like to have split zone lots. And so that one is part of the overall going from commercial limited or commercial to high density residential. There's Park Dock, that's the piece of property that we purchased, so that is currently under high density. No, I'm sorry, low density residential, and it should be open space recreation public. So and then the next one is, this is the odd area at the end of Mercy Reading Court. And so the area to the left that is a separate red square. So there was if you can see a little yellow square just to the right of that, that is owned by the Dutra family, and this is on part of Dutra Farm. They went to develop that piece of property, and they wanted to add property onto it. But then that's when we realized that it was actually zoned, should be zoned R40. It's actually shown that way in our GIS. And for some reason, that little area was listed as RR80 or as low density residential, and it should be moderate density residential. So that area in the left in its own circle, I just said that should be changed too. Otherwise, that lot would be a split lot. So they added that onto the other square that's yellow. So that's now one lot. Yeah. If that makes sense. Okay, and the last one, I think we've gone through all of them. Is there a next? Yep, that was all of them. So now is the time for questions and comments.
So the solution to putting the R8 focused by the library, Luther and stuff like that is that they need an overlay district, so.
Some kind of district that's kind of a combination between, it has a little bit more commercial rights, including home-based business, and R8, so it's gonna be kind of a hybrid. Yeah. That's what we're envisioning at least. Certainly that process has to go through meetings and public hearings, etc. So I can't make any promises about what it will look like at the time when it's adopted.
And how much land is protected in James? So I somehow have 40% in my head.
It does say it in here.
Does?
Yes. Yeah. I will look last.
But
Oh, on those tabs, Nancy.
Now it's our first status. Yeah.
this is.
So I think it's on page 10, land use and land cover.
Land use.
Page 10, land use, page 10. Now, you have to remember this. It's based on the land use land cover map, which is a state geographic information system map. So this can include areas of, let's say you have a 10-acre piece of property and there's a house on there. The GIS system is only going to pick up the house, and then the rest of it's going to show as open space. So this particular table
Doesn't help.
so I believe it is quantified elsewhere. Here in the build out analysis, we do it, I think a more detailed look at that. And that was something we had to wrestle with a lot, was the build out analysis, because last time we did it, we had an employee that was super whiz at GIS. And we have somebody now that does GIS, but it's a build out analysis by GIS is a very, very difficult and complicated process. And so, we were able to do it literally lot by lot, and look at it that way. This time, having the consultant do it, they're looking at it. The state only requires that we look at that table that you just saw. And They look at it at a very, and basically like. Let's divide this whole area into 80,000 square feet, you know, lots. How many do we have? How many houses do we have? What's left? So it's a very, very 10,000 foot level analysis the state requires. And I said that won't work for us because the numbers were coming out so wacky because we did such a detailed analysis of our build out last time. So luckily, we had already done the build out analysis for the water system, for the water system supply management plan. So we had that information, so we were able to compare that against what they were doing as kind of an, you know, comparing of what they were doing, and so numbers that they came up with in the build out analysis, I believe, are fairly accurate. Yes. Any other questions? Yes, yeah.
Yeah, you answered a lot of my questions, said a couple. Under the, page 40. It talks about H19, encourage and assist the change.
Is this under land use? Which section?
Just for names.
Okay. On page 40, you said?
40.
Yes, thank you.
I was just curious, H19 reads encourage and assist the Jamestown Housing Authority to becoming more active affordable housing provider. Just wanted to know what.
It's funny, we were just talking about that before this, for the 2 meetings ago today, at the affordable housing meeting. So, the Jamestown Housing Authority, as you know, is going through a process of, repositioning. And so, I don't know if the council is aware of that. Okay, so we don't really need to get into that, but so. The housing authority has had a separate arm, a separate, you know, 501c3.
I'm aware of that.
Okay, and so not the one to raise funds for the.
Oh, then I'm on.
Okay, so.
Okay.
And so they always, you know, even back when Syria Carl was the head of the housing authority, always kind of had an idea that they wanted to get more into affordable housing and not just senior housing. So we've had discussions at the Affordable Housing Committee with Nikki Vasquez, the executive director, about, you know, how, you know, how can that happen? So I think that's what that means, is that they might have interest in becoming, say, a housing monitor. They might have interest in becoming a housing land trust. They might have, you know, so I think just having discussions with them is kind of what that means, as to how they could kind of enter that affordable housing realm and assist the town in that.
I agree, so there was also a period to talk about the fact that the repositioning that you talked about is that the federal government is no longer interested in being landlords. And so what they would rather have is a developer or community take over the ownership of property and the maintenance of property, and just, they would simply money to open it.
So in this case, I understand you correctly, we are going back in time.
Yes.
When we did own it, and they had couples living there in that.
Well, I don't think we ever owned it.
Oh, whatever.
I don't think, so for example, the other housing, further down Pemberton, Jamestown Village is more typical of current affordable housing, where everybody is just the rent, the payments, the vouchers, stuff like that is happening. That's what the federal government supplies, and a private entity, in this case, a developer, and they have properties all over New England. You know, they basically maintain it, continue it. So the housing authority, this has been long term with HUD, even before the current administration, and so the housing authority is looking for to do this redevelop this, which may be the developer may buy a housing, may buy it, or may get it, and therefore be responsible for renovation. The town could also try to do that. You know, I think the issues of maintenance, which have been the issues that have plagued in Pemberton, right? This is the 75-year-old boiler, or the 50-year-old boiler, or things like that. So this is a big deal, and so it means, so then does the housing authority become more like the Narragansett Housing Authority, which monitors public housing and does all sorts of stuff? Or you know, what is its role?
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Next question. Sorry. So under open space, agriculture and recreation on page 15. It's under Beaver Hill State Park. I know, just because I'm involved with it, but no one else would have noticed this, but I did, so. Wait to get there. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay, so on page 15, first paragraph, it's just, verbiage. It said the town is a party to a memorandum of agreement with the Rhode Island Department of Environment and Management, Beavertail Lighthouse Museum Association, correct? To own and maintain the property and structures in accordance with the provision of the National Historic Lighthouse Preservation Act. The only thing that I find, and again, I talked it over with Dave before the meeting, we don't own it. The town doesn't have any ownership, and neither does the Beavertail Lighthouse Museum Association have any ownership.
Right.
It's managed. So I didn't know if you wanted to.
Okay, make it clear that DEM owns it.
Yeah. And I think the answer to my housing authority question, so I'm done. Thank you. With questions.
I feel it was a general question on this similar topic. There. The plan talks about Dutch and Gould Island a few times in it throughout the plan, but doesn't. I feel like most of what's there is just historic information on what was happening. Am I missing it anywhere, or can we really get it anywhere talking about where our future hopes, plans, dreams, what we'd like to see happen in those spaces are?
Yeah, there is a discussion about the process that's going on now in Gould Island.
Yep.
And I'd have to look at implementation to see, because I do remember.
It does talk about the current your process, remediation and open space page 10. And I know I read it in way short sections where it was smaller reference like business. But I don't think I really saw much. I think maybe I'm missing it.
Maybe I'll chime in, I guess, to the folks that helped to author the document, do we have ambitions there, or should we read that they're, it's not a priority for the next 10 years to look at putting a little more Dutch or doing something there? It's perfectly fine to say that really wasn't a priority, or we're not really thinking about that. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'll have to do a word search, because it's right now but I remember there being language in here describing the process that's going on right now for Gould Island. There's also language in here related to the Bay Island Park System and really pursuing that, which includes Dutch and Gould. And supporting that at DEM level, because we've asked DEM to pretty strongly to really look at future planning of both Dutch and Gould.
And the dilemma is, of course, that they are under control of, well, I think Gould, both the federal government and DEM and Dutch DEM, and it's their budget constraints that are.
Sure. Yeah, and we're in a very strange situation where we consider it part of Jamestown. However, we don't have full access, authority, or frankly, budget to do much.
We should just tax it.
That's right. We'll tax all the residents on the whole place.
Yeah, no, that's the state.
Great. But that said, we have done work as a community. I know quite a bit has been done over the last 7 or 8 years now. From Jamestown residents on the remediation plans. And it's been a topic on a number of occasions, right? I just was curious if you had more thoughts, plans, intentions of laying out future electric teachers.
So, to be honest, I don't recall detailed discussions about Gould or Dutch, other than mostly the historical context. So I mean, we did spend a lot of time. It's not too late.
Yeah,
You spent a lot of. You spent a lot, yeah,
We didn't talk about
those things.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily implying anything, I'm just, you have to be clear about what you're gonna do and sometimes what you're not gonna do, and I think that's okay.
It's a great point. We did really highlight it at, at a workshop about opportunity there. We didn't get any public input really about, nobody felt about access, access.
But it is discussed and we do discuss the sites
We did,
in the plan, yeah.
but we didn't talk about future camping.
Right, I just looked in the open space and recreation action plan, and it's not mentioned in there.
I think we briefly acknowledged the, disagreement, between development versus preservation. We're gonna talk about that for a minute.
Right.
Here we go, yeah.
Does anybody have anything?
The changing demographic of Jamestown, is just that described in here in terms of, particularly in terms of school population.
Yes,
Yeah.
sort of the public services element.
Yeah, I saw that, and where you talk about looking at more, looking at the,
Right,
yeah,
yeah,
right. And just also, but also the changing demographic in terms of, price per house, you know.
oh, yes, yes, that's in the housing element. Yeah, it's a significant part of it because I think that the, you know, the escalating real estate prices is a significant impact. And it also discusses, you know, median family income and how that has shifted, but it's still with, and now there's even a wider gap between incomes and housing prices.
Any question about the historic district?
Yes,
Creating them? Mary, can you give some background on how it was for me now?
Well, actually, you're talking to the person who voted against, one group of people who voted against it. The letter of Shoreby Hill is that Shoreby Hill is a private community. And so the request was to simply make it of Shoreby Hill, historic district. And we asked them if they would please be willing to open their roads. And they weren't. And so they have the possibility of closing the roads, as you know, they're now with the kind of impeded, they're not exactly locked as they used to be, and they weren't really particularly locked either, you could open the gate. But it decided it wanted to retain that capacity and that sort of method of control of itself, and of course, you know, as a result of that was the loss of the casino, that building at the bottom, you know, so. And the Reefs House, which is currently under reconstruction, I think that's part of Shoreby, so I guess somehow that got approved. But that was the major reason, so, I mean, in terms of from my point of view, because to have limited it to simply this one private district. Where there were others, I think you might think now, I mean, I've thought a lot about it since, I thought a lot about it then. That some of the major roads of Jamestown, you might simply want to say, these all need additional protection, because we need to protect this historical views, you know. If you can, you know, so that was my reasoning for why I had to vote against it after being pretty supportive of creating the historic district. That makes sense.
It does make sense. Does this talk about expanding a historic district to outside of Ferryville?
well, we don't have any historic districts currently, so it does talk about, really investigating the value of creating a historic district.
Part of the process. Designated that many places. Fine, we were going through that whole discussion. And some of the owners were like, hey, don't dictate to me what I'm gonna do with my property.
Yeah, they were divided
Absolutely.
internally.
But we do have that list of significant historic.
Value, place of houses of value, buildings of value. Yeah, right. I mean, the other option is you could just turn the whole pin. You know, and then, I mean, even though, because what happens in Newport, when you deal with an historic district, I've done work there. They just simply say, well, this is not an historic house in here, this is in the historic district, you have to go through the process. But they say this is not a relevant property, so. Yeah, you can go ahead and do this, that, or the other thing, you know? So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot more complicated than just creating a historic district. There's a commission, there's then a process, there needs to be staff, so it's a big consideration, but I think that. I think looking at that option, you know, to protect our historic resources and our character, I think is important.
I think it is, and, you know, you were always subject as. These folks know, being on the planning commission, zoning board, that somebody's aesthetic taste or whatever. I mean, I've had people say unbelievably stupid things to me on an historic district board. And, you know, you just think about, really, you have the right to do that? And of course, in some historic districts, they actually tell you the color you can paint your house. So, you know, there are some limitations that are difficult to deal with, but I think. Yeah, I think there are a lot of benefits. I mean, Newport is an example. I mean, the Point, for example, is a perfect example of the benefits of a historic district. And even though I'm making these complaints, the process when it's clear is not necessarily onerous. I mean, I've always found that when zoning processes are clear and stuff like that, you just do them. And people who complain about them are people who have expectations that they're going to be, you know, that they didn't think any of this was applicable to them. But I think that they, you know, I think it's really important for a clear process, and when it is, it was perfectly. I mean, I may be the person who got the last historic house in Newport, Rhode Island torn down. When we did, I mean, not the last historic, but an historic house. I mean, when I say last, the last one that was ever torn down, because I was working next door to it was a complete wreck, and my client was taking the property. And so it was a complete wreck of the historic district. So, yeah, you're right.
If you look at comprehensive group that was on the number of historic overlays.
Yeah, like five.
And you can see that like Center Street, which has some beautiful historic houses, is the historic commission that you've probably been in front of them, I've been in front of them. They protect those vistas, those historic vistas through the commission. When you get inside the block, which is also historic, they're a little bit less, you know, so I think you really what it comes down to is a common sense historic issue.
Yeah,
District.
absolutely.
Because they're going to say, well, you have the right image. You don't have to have, you know, precise windows, precise screen doors or
Right.
whatever.
Right, I mean, the hilarity, just sorry, I'm going on, that you could not put a storm window on a historic structure. Because, you know, because you had to somehow. But
People were.
Oh, it's yeah, I agree. So perfect.
And do that right away, much.
And that's why we have challenges in this area to some people.
I just, I'm sorry.
The historic Shorty Hill Historic District didn't really, one reason it didn't go forward is because, first of all, there's two Shorties, it's very lower, right? There wasn't complete buy-in from the neighborhood. I think that was probably the biggest hurrah we ever had, and it was vocal about, they shouted us down and said, "Got town now," you know, the offshoot of that.
But that wasn't successful, Michael, you're still there.
But then the offshoot of that, you know, which added guidelines, being started to impose some architectural standards.
Right.
In the district.
Which are very specific and I think very helpful.
So that was a way around it.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I have like two or three quickly, so I was trying to find like where, and forgive me, this is my first time going through comments. So I might ask a question and it may not be like fully contextual, but. You know, we're gonna have probably the most significant construction projects in many generations, whatever we did with the Great Creek Bridge or the causeway that's there. Is that reflected in the document some way in terms of like how we're thinking about that, or how we should think about that, or we should engage the state like that? I couldn't find it in a goal or an all out, and maybe it was purposeful, But I just wanted to raise that for you.
You mentioned it.
Yeah, I went back through and I did a word search.
Oh, you did.
So that.
Well, we do talk
feels-
about pretty strongly, I think it's in the public services, that the town should remain engaged and coordinated with the state on projects that affect Jamestown. So I think that is,
I mean, I think for this one, we might want to have. It might be, we might want.
has the council taken a position on what you want?
Well, I think one thing we have to make, I think social housing, right, is that we know that we're looking for whatever the solution is, to be a comprehensive one that includes things like protecting views, that includes a bike path, and ensuring if we have something that continues or improves connection between the north and south part of the state, town. And when we work with the state, we know we're gonna need to include multiple organizations, right, which is one of the challenges that we have as a community. We're constantly gonna have to stay on the state to make sure that we're not just talking with DOT, but we're also talking to DEM. Because we're gonna be looking for linear park money as we look for road money to have fun. So I think actually specifically, if you'd write that up, then it's, that should be something we probably specifically call out, is if we lose track of that as a town over the next 10 years, it's gonna be a disaster.
Yeah.
So it should be a specific goal of ours to stay on top of it. You're right, that's the largest thing I'm running to, but it's not having.
Yeah, and I don't know, and I don't want to box, I mean, I don't know, like. We haven't talked about it in depth in council. And I don't think we have like a clear position. And I think that's okay, I think we just need to be able to have it in a way to accommodate that. So that was what you wanted.
Could be under your sustainable resilience.
I'm looking
Yeah,
at transportation, so.
Transportation, sustainable and resilience, I think there's a few different places.
Yeah, so I mean, if you say things like work with the RIDOT and town DPW to include bicycle lanes as part of state and town upgrades while retaining rural road character in coordination with the bicycle master plan.
I just think we're just, 50 to 100. I don't know why I can't.
But
Yeah.
it's not our money.
Yeah, it's.
It is our money, actually, it's just that. I mean, that's how.
No,
It's all,
but
but it's.
But it's one side gets money, and
That's right, that's accurate. But I think to your point, we're not picking an outcome at any point at this point, but how we continue to engage multiple access, multiple organizations and parts of the state as a community jointly. Like that should be a focus of the town council for the next 10 years. That should be a focus of the planning committee. Yeah, it should be a focus of conservation, like the bike committee, work with transportation. That's gonna be a focus for so many parts. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if it needs no section, but it could be, we probably could call it out in likely of those sections. Where there's some language already there that probably supports it.
Yeah.
Probably call it out specifically.
I'm recollecting,
you can make the language.
here we go, encouraging, this is what you had asked before, encourage an Narragansett Bay master plan which establishes a vision for compatibility. The many and varied uses of the bay. Anyway, so that was the previous question. But I'm recollecting a section that talks about working with DOT to making sure that road upgrades meet the character of our island. So is it is something like that?
We should call it out for sure.
Yeah.
For example, North Road, where the future project. So I think there are probably 3 or 4 places in here to just call it out specifically. To
Yeah,
highlight how.
I will look at it before next week and see like, this is what we have so far. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you want to, and then we can discuss how you want.
Yeah, I don't want to be super prescriptive, I feel a problem.
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna include. Probably the causeway from Mexico.
Yes. And I might be getting my hazard mitigation plan and our resiliency plan mixed up with this, but I'm like, I know we have language, but we'll look at that. Thank you.
At the beginning, where we talk about whose responsibility is, boom.
Mhm. Yeah,
That's right, I think it is important to call it out.
in the action
We
plan.
are downstream from the state and from federal
Yeah.
And we'll easily be able to deal with this in 10 years when it's not, nothing done and what's been done.
You'll be establishing the vetting system.
Two other ones quickly. I think like in transportation, right now we have some state roads that are 40 miles an hour. If they were 35 miles an hour, you could incorporate more of those speed vehicles. So in terms of like, if we're thinking about alternative electric transportation, I know we can't just do it. We need the state, state DOT, I think, to work with us, but that would unlock like Beavertail, that would unlock road, North Road, places like that. We can have some more sustainable methods of transportation, so that was one. And then, I guess I think it will be very quickly. Those are the.
Thank you. Are there anyone else? Any questions? Question or? Okay. Well, I want to say that my kids didn't do all enough for all the hard work we did. Putting through this, anybody else, I don't want to be anything. The meetings, the workshops, how many months? We have
16, 17.
Yeah, it's just incredible, and it's a huge commitment and really appreciate it.
Did you accept public?
What's that?
Are you going to accept public comment?
Not something? No, I was not.
There's one member.
I know, but I mentioned at the beginning, I was on.
Okay.
It's very fast. And save that till next week for the public hearing. And this is an incredible, amount of, piece of work to do it. And I can't wait to read it again when I don't feel like I have to, be pressured to come here or to look for things that might be changing or whatever. Because the history, the information that's in here, it's so interesting. I think anybody would be happy to sit and read it, I really do. So thank you. Thank you so much. All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
What, adjourn, what, on favor?
Good night.
Yes. Sorry, I should have.